Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we explore about the terrifying truth about quantum biology. We experience our existence through a very specific, highly filtered biological lens. We know what it means to be alive because we can physically feel the heavy, continuous rhythm of it. We feel the steady, mechanical pump of blood pushing relentlessly through our vascular systems. We experience the sudden, forceful contraction of muscle fiber when we move, the rhythmic expansion of our lungs as they draw in the heavy atmosphere of the Earth, and the constant, radiating heat of our own internal metabolism. To be alive is to exist in a state of continuous, microscopic friction. Biology, as we perceive it, is fundamentally warm, wet, and inherently chaotic. It is a macroscopic reality, built on the solid, predictable, and forgiving laws of cause and effect. We are comfortable in this biological domain because it makes intuitive sense to our evolving brains. When a predator lunges, it follows a strict, predictable physical trajectory governed by gravity and momentum. When a seed is buried, it anchors its roots into the solid earth and reaches for the light. Every instinct we possess, every reflex programmed into our nervous system, is perfectly calibrated to navigate this heavy, tangible world of flesh, bone, and chemical reaction. Because our reality is so heavily grounded in these predictable, mechanical rules, we naturally feel entirely disconnected from the alien landscape of the microscopic abyss. When we look down past the tissue, past the cells, and into the deepest, most fundamental layers of the universe, the comforting rules of biology violently break down. The quantum realm is not warm, and it is not wet. It is a cold, sterile, and deeply bizarre arena governed by absolute paradox and mathematical uncertainty. It is a shadow realm where the rigid logic of human experience is completely obliterated. In the quantum void, particles do not possess a single, fixed location. They smear across the vacuum in a ghostly haze of probabilities. They can exist in multiple, contradictory states at exactly the same time, occupying every possible configuration until they are forced to choose. They can become entangled, binding their fates together so completely that a change in one particle instantly dictates the state of its partner, even if that partner is located across the vast, freezing expanse of a galaxy, mocking the very concept of distance and the speed of light. They can even tunnel through impenetrable physical barriers, disappearing from one location and reappearing in another like phantoms passing through a solid wall of lead. These phenomena are so deeply unsettling, so completely divorced from our everyday experience of reality, that for the vast majority of modern history, human science constructed a massive, conceptual wall to keep them entirely separate from the study of life. This was the classical lie. It was a comforting division of labor, an intellectual quarantine that allowed us to categorize the cosmos into safe, manageable, and distinct boxes. For decades, the scientific consensus rigidly dictated that the universe was split into two completely separate domains, governed by entirely different masters. Physics was the language of the inanimate. It was the mathematical tool used to describe the dead things of the universe. The slow, grinding decay of ancient geological formations, the terrifying thermonuclear collapse of distant, dying stars, and the silent, isolated clockwork of subatomic particles floating in the absolute zero of the cosmic vacuum. Biology, on the other hand, was the exclusive, sacred domain of the living. It was viewed purely as a macroscopic science of fluids, thermodynamics, and highly complex, yet entirely predictable, molecular chemistry. Biologists studied the chaotic, boiling soup of organic matter, tracking the collision of enzymes and proteins in a messy, wet environment, while quantum physicists studied the pristine, isolated mathematics of the void. And this strict separation was not just a matter of academic preference or stubborn tradition. It was rooted in what seemed to be an absolute, undeniable, and unbreakable law of thermodynamics. To understand why this wall was built, and why it stood unchallenged for so long, you must understand the concept of quantum decoherence, the strange, reality-breaking phenomena of the quantum world. The teleportation, the superposition, the entangled states are incredibly fragile. They are the delicate, whispering ghosts of the universe. In order to observe a particle existing in two places at once, physicists must go to terrifying, almost impossible lengths to protect that particle from the noise of the outside world. They must construct massive, heavily shielded subterranean laboratories, isolating their experiments from the faintest, imperceptible seismic tremors of the Earth. They must chill their instruments down to a fraction of a degree above absolute zero, plunging the environment into an artificial, freezing death, removing almost all thermal energy from the system. If a single stray photon of ambient light or a random, vibrating molecule of air collides with the quantum state, the fragile illusion is instantly and violently shattered. The superposition collapses, the magic vanishes, and the particle is forced to behave like a normal, predictable, and dead piece of macroscopic matter. The quantum ghost simply cannot survive contact with a noisy, chaotic environment. Now, compare that freezing, isolated, perfectly sterile laboratory to the interior of a living biological cell. A living cell is the exact opposite of a quiet quantum vacuum. It is a microscopic war zone. It is a suffocating, overcrowded, and violently agitated environment filled with billions of massive protein structures, chaotic water molecules, and frantic, spinning enzymes. Everything inside a living organism is moving at blinding speeds. Everything is colliding, tearing apart, and rebuilding in a continuous, deafening frenzy of biological necessity. The internal temperature of a mammalian body is a raging, boiling inferno compared to the near absolute zero required by quantum physicists. The thermal noise alone, the relentless, jittering vibration of trillions of atoms transferring heat, should be mathematically deafening. According to the strict, uncompromising laws of classical physics, this biological hurricane should act as an absolute, unforgiving executioner for anything resembling quantum behavior. The frantic, boiling environment of a living cell should instantly crush any delicate quantum state before it even has the chance to form. Superpositions should collapse in a billionth of a second, entirely drowned out by the molecular chaos. Entanglement should be impossible to maintain. Teleportation should be violently forbidden by the sheer density of the organic matter. The scientific consensus was absolute and unquestioned. The wet, messy, chaotic machinery of life was simply too loud, too hot, and too violent for the quiet ghosts of quantum mechanics to survive. Biology was nothing more than highly complex, Newtonian chemistry acting on a vast scale. We believed this because it made us feel safe. It maintained the illusion that life was a distinct, isolated phenomenon, operating on familiar, rational rules, safely insulated from the terrifying uncertainty and the bizarre paradoxes of the cosmic basement. We like the idea that we were built out of solid building blocks, interacting in predictable ways. But the universe does not care about our comforting illusions, nor does it respect the artificial boundaries we draw in our textbooks. Over the last 2 decades, as our instruments grew sharper, as our lasers grew more precise, and as our gaze pierced deeper into the fundamental architecture of living tissues, the rigid wall between the living and the dead began to crack. And then, quite suddenly, it completely collapsed. We are now living through one of the most profound and deeply unsettling paradigm shifts in the entire history of human knowledge. The classical lie has been exposed. The terrifying revelation of modern science is that the chaotic, boiling noise of the biological cell does not destroy the quantum ghost. Instead, against all established classical logic and thermodynamic reason, the machinery of life has somehow learned to protect it, to harness it, and to aggressively weaponize it. Biology is not just chemistry. At its absolute, unfathomable foundation, life is actively exploiting the bizarre, reality-breaking mechanics of the subatomic abyss just to survive. When we peel back the macroscopic layers of familiar organic matter, looking past the pumping blood, the firing neurons, and the twisting strands of genetic code, we do not find a predictable, clockwork machine. We find a system that is intimately, continuously, and desperately communicating with the void. The living organism is not a refuge from the strange laws of the universe. It is the ultimate, masterful expression of them. Evolution, acting over billions of years in the blind, dark, and hostile oceans of the ancient Earth, did not ignore the quantum realm. It did not retreat from the uncertainty of the microscopic world. It engineered a way to control it. It built molecular structures designed specifically to catch the quantum ghosts and put them to work. This realization fundamentally shatters everything we thought we knew about the nature of our own existence. It forces us to confront the fact that the warm, wet, familiar reality of our bodies is deeply and permanently tethered to a cold, sterile, and incomprehensible underworld. The phenomena that physicists struggle to maintain for fractions of a second in billion-dollar cryogenic chambers are occurring naturally, relentlessly, and perfectly inside the damp, chaotic environment of a leaf, a bird's eye, and the deepest, most sacred architecture of your own cells. We are forced to ask terrifying new questions about the physical world. If the machinery of life relies on particles existing in multiple states simultaneously, if biological survival depends on the ability to teleport across impenetrable barriers without traversing the space between, then what exactly is a living being? We can no longer draw a neat, comfortable boundary around our skin and claim that we are separate from the cold mechanics of the cosmos. The boundary does not exist. The barrier was always an illusion. To understand quantum biology is to undergo a radical, existential unmooring. It is the terrifying realization that the heavy, solid world we navigate is entirely propped up by the formless and the unseen. The very spark of life, the hidden mechanism that allows biological matter to organize, breathe, reproduce, and conquer the planet, is entirely dependent on the physical impossibilities of the subatomic world. We are not just macroscopic creatures made of dead atoms bumping into one another in the dark. We are walking, breathing quantum paradoxes. Our existence is a macroscopic manifestation of the quantum void, a highly organized, wet, organic machine built out of probability, entanglement, and uncertainty. The ghosts of the universe are not locked away in the freezing dark of outer space, and they are not confined to the chalkboards of theoretical physicists. They are inside us. They are driving the machinery of our biology. And as we descend deeper into the architecture of life, we must face the unsettling truth that we are surviving at the absolute mercy of the quantum abyss. Every living thing on this planet is locked in a desperate, unending war against entropy. The universe, by its very nature, demands decay. It desires cold, it favors disorder, and it ruthlessly dismantles complexity wherever it finds it. To simply exist as a biological organism, to maintain the highly organized, fragile architecture of flesh, bone, or cellulose, requires a continuous, massive influx of energy. We must constantly pay an energetic toll to the cosmos just to prevent our own physical dissolution. For humanity, and for nearly every moving creature on Earth, that energy is acquired through consumption. We survive by taking in the stored energy of other organisms, stealing their organized matter to sustain our own. But this chain of consumption cannot stretch backward into infinity. At the very foundation of the biological world, there must be a primary engine. There must be an anchor that reaches out into the dead, freezing vacuum of space and pulls raw power down into the biosphere. This ultimate anchor is photosynthesis. We are taught to view photosynthesis as a quiet, passive, and mundane piece of background biology. It is simply what plants do, a gentle chemical reaction playing out in the background of our bustling world. But when you strip away the familiarity, when you look at the fundamental mechanics of what is actually happening inside the dark green tissue of a leaf, it is an act of staggering, cosmic defiance. A plant is reaching across 93 million miles of empty, hostile void to catch the blinding radiation of a runaway nuclear fusion reactor. It is capturing a massless packet of pure electromagnetic energy, a photon that was forged in the extreme, crushing core of the sun, and it is physically arresting its flight. The plant stops the photon, absorbs its raw power, and transforms that fleeting, intangible ghost of energy into the solid, chemical reality of a sugar molecule. This singular, silent mechanism is the heavy lifting that sustains the entire planetary ecosystem. Without it, the world starves, and the biological experiment on Earth abruptly ends in the dark. To understand the terrifying anomaly at the heart of this process, we must plunge into the microscopic architecture of the plant cell. When that solar photon ends its 8-minute journey across the cosmic void and strikes the surface of a leaf, it plunges into a dense, incredibly complex molecular forest known as the antenna complex. This is a sprawling, chaotic array of chlorophyll molecules, beautifully designed by billions of years of evolution to act as a biological satellite dish. The photon slams into one of these chlorophyll molecules and is instantly annihilated. But its energy survives. The energy is transferred to an electron, exciting it, tearing it away from its resting state, and creating a mobile, highly energetic entity known as an exciton. Now, the true struggle for survival begins. This exciton, this tiny packet of harvested solar energy, has a singular, desperate mission. It must navigate through the sprawling, three-dimensional maze of the antenna complex and find its way to a highly specific destination called the reaction center. The reaction center is the biological furnace, the exact molecular location where the energy will finally be converted into stable chemical food. But the exciton is racing against a ticking clock. It only has a fraction of a billionth of a second to complete this journey. If it takes too long, the energy will simply dissipate. It will bleed out into the surrounding molecular environment as useless, random heat, and the plant will have caught the light for nothing. This is where the strict, unforgiving laws of classical physics step in, and where the mystery begins to spiral into the impossible. According to the classical mechanics that govern our macroscopic world, the transfer of this energy should be incredibly clumsy, chaotic, and lossy. The interior of a living cell is not a quiet, empty vacuum. It is a violently hot, densely packed, and fiercely agitated environment. Billions of atoms are constantly jittering and slamming into one another, driven by the relentless chaos of thermal energy. When the exciton tries to move through this microscopic minefield, classical physics dictates that it must perform what is known as a random walk. Imagine placing a blindfolded person inside a dense, crowded room where all the furniture is constantly vibrating and shifting, and asking them to find a single, specific exit before a timer runs out. They cannot see the destination. They can only stumble forward, bumping into a table, ricocheting off a wall, bouncing blindly from one obstacle to the next. This is the classical model of energy transfer. The exciton should act like a microscopic pinball, bouncing randomly from one chlorophyll molecule to the next, hoping to eventually stumble upon the reaction center by sheer, dumb luck. If biology actually relied on this blind, random walk, photosynthesis would be a catastrophic failure. The process would be unbelievably inefficient. The exciton would take wrong turns. It would get trapped in molecular dead ends. It would bounce back and forth between the same two molecules, wasting precious fractions of a second. In a chaotic, vibrating environment, this clumsy pinball mechanism should result in a massive loss of power. The vast majority of the harvested solar energy should simply radiate away as waste heat, long before it ever reaches the reaction center. According to the foundational laws of classical thermodynamics, plants should be starving. If classical physics were the only framework governing the mechanics of life, the forests of the earth would wither, the oceans would suffocate, and the planet would be a barren, rocky wasteland. But the plants are not starving. When physicists actually measure the efficiency of this energy transfer within the leaf, the results are so flawless that they completely shatter the classical model. The exciton does not get lost. It does not waste its time bouncing blindly through the molecular maze. It navigates the antenna complex and arrives at the reaction center with an efficiency approaching 100%. Almost every single packet of captured energy makes it to the destination perfectly, bypassing the thermal chaos entirely. This level of flawless efficiency is an absolute physical impossibility under the rules of classical mechanics. A blindfolded entity stumbling through a vibrating room does not find the exit on the first try, every single time, with zero wasted effort. The math simply does not work. The classical universe cannot explain the survival of the biosphere. To solve the mystery of the leaf, science had to abandon the familiar, predictable rules of biology and stare directly into the abyss of quantum mechanics. The terrifying truth is that the plant is not playing by the rules of the macroscopic world. It is surviving by exploiting a fundamental glitch in the fabric of reality. When the photon strikes the leaf and creates the exciton, that packet of energy does not behave like a solid, classical particle. It does not act like a pinball bouncing through a maze. Instead, the biological machinery of the plant forces the exciton to behave like a wave of pure probability. The leaf pushes the energy into a state of quantum superposition. In the deeply bizarre, counterintuitive realm of quantum mechanics, a particle in a state of superposition does not possess a single, defined location. It exists in a state of shimmering, undefined potential, capable of occupying multiple places and exploring multiple trajectories at exactly the same time. The concept violently rejects our everyday human logic, but it is an absolute, undeniable reality of the subatomic world. When the exciton enters this state of quantum coherence within the leaf, it stops being a single entity moving blindly from one point to another. It becomes a ghost. The energy effectively splits. It casts a wave of probability across the entire antenna complex, moving through the molecular forest, not by taking a single path, but by taking every possible path simultaneously. Imagine the blindfolded man in the crowded room again. But this time, he does not stumble. The exact moment he is asked to find the exit, he dissolves into 1,000 phantom versions of himself. These ghosts fan out, exploring every single inch of the room, checking every corner, every hallway, and every dead end at exactly the same time. They map the entire spatial geometry of the room in a single, instantaneous heartbeat. Because they are waves, they can interact with one another. When the phantoms collide in the wrong directions, they cancel each other out through destructive interference. But when they align on the most direct, perfectly optimal path to the exit, they amplify each other through constructive interference. When the wave finally touches the exit, the entire probability state collapses. The most perfectly efficient route is instantly identified, and the energy materializes at the destination without a single wasted movement. This is what is happening inside the quiet, green tissue of a plant. The captured solar energy is feeling out the entire molecular landscape in a state of quantum superposition. It is running a simultaneous calculation of every conceivable route to the reaction center, experiencing the dead ends and the fast tracks all at once. The exciton simply rides the wave of probability directly to the furnace, completely bypassing the chaotic thermal noise of the cell. The implications of this mechanism are profound and deeply unsettling. We are forced to reevaluate the very nature of the biological organism. A plant is not just a passive piece of organic chemistry absorbing water and sunlight. Every single green leaf on the planet, every blade of grass, and every towering pine tree is a biological quantum computer. They are performing calculations that would require massive, super-cooled, multi-million-dollar artificial quantum processors to simulate. And they are doing it effortlessly, relentlessly, trillions of times a second, in the warm breeze of a summer day. The plant is actively running quantum algorithms to harvest the sun. This revelation entirely collapses the artificial wall we built between the living world and the sterile, mechanical universe. We have always assumed that the bizarre, delicate phenomena of quantum mechanics, the teleportation, the superposition, the ghostly wave functions, were too fragile to survive outside of a highly controlled, freezing vacuum. We believed that the wet, boiling, messy reality of biology would instantly crush any quantum state through decoherence. Human engineers must plunge their synthetic quantum computers into vats of liquid helium, dropping the temperature to a fraction of a degree above absolute zero just to maintain a fragile state of superposition for a few fleeting microseconds. But the leaf proves our assumptions entirely wrong. The organic world did not retreat from the bizarre laws of the subatomic abyss. It evolved to master them. Over billions of years of blind, relentless adaptation, nature engineered a molecular architecture capable of shielding the quantum ghost from the chaotic noise of the macroscopic world. The protein scaffolds within the leaf are perfectly tuned, vibrating at exact frequencies designed to protect the quantum coherence of the exciton just long enough for it to perform its simultaneous calculation. The plant uses the chaos to its advantage, turning the thermal noise of the biological cell into a finely tuned instrument that pushes the quantum wave toward its destination. When you walk through a dense, quiet forest, you are not simply walking through a collection of living flora. You are standing in the middle of a sprawling, planetary-scale network of quantum machines. The silence of the woods is a macroscopic illusion. On a subatomic level, the environment is screaming with computational activity. Trillions upon trillions of organic quantum computers are catching the radiation of a distant star, splitting the energy into phantoms, exploring infinite pathways through the dark, and collapsing probability waves to sustain the delicate, fragile balance of life on Earth. This blurring of the boundary between biology and quantum mechanics strips away the comforting simplicity of our worldview. It reveals that the physical machinery of life is indistinguishable from highly advanced, almost alien technology. We are accustomed to thinking of machines as things made of silicon, steel, and wire, built in sterile, clean rooms and powered by alternating current. But the quantum computer in the leaf is built of carbon, water, and sunlight. It is a wet, breathing machine, forged in the dirt, continuously rewriting the rules of what is possible in a warm environment. It forces us to confront a haunting, existential perspective on our own existence. We stand at the very top of the food chain, building our towering cities and viewing ourselves as the undisputed masters of the physical world. We believe that we are sustained by the predictable, mechanical laws of chemistry and biology. Yet, every single calorie we consume, every breath of oxygen we take, and every beat of our macroscopic hearts is entirely dependent on a physical impossibility happening quietly in the background. The foundation of our entire reality is propped up by a glitch in the classical universe. The biosphere survives only because the cosmos allows energy to exist in multiple places at once. We are not separate from the strange, paradoxical behavior of the quantum realm. We are the ultimate, macroscopic consequence of it. The warmth of biology is fueled by the cold, calculating logic of quantum superposition. The living world is merely a highly organized shell, a complex, organic containment field designed to capture and exploit the ghostly mechanics of the void. And as we continue to pull back the layers of the natural world, we must learn to live with the unsettling truth that the things we consider the most ordinary, a blade of grass, a green leaf, a ray of sunlight, are masking the deepest, most incomprehensible mysteries of the cosmos. The ghost is in the machine, and the machine is alive. The surface of our planet is a restless, unforgiving arena. Driven by the tilt of the earth and the relentless cycle of the seasons, the environment shifts from abundance to freezing starvation in a matter of months. To survive this brutal transition, life has adopted a strategy of continuous, desperate motion. Every year, billions of organisms embark on staggering journeys across the face of the globe, crossing vast oceans, navigating treacherous mountain ranges, and flying through the freezing dark of the upper atmosphere. This is the great phenomenon of migration. It is a testament to biological endurance, but beneath the physical struggle lies a profound, haunting mystery of navigation. Consider the European robin. It is a remarkably fragile creature, a tiny songbird that weighs roughly half an ounce. It is a handful of feathers, hollow bones, and a rapidly beating heart. Yet, when the temperatures begin to plummet and the days grow short, this delicate organism launches itself into the sky and navigates thousands of miles across the continent with flawless, mechanical precision. It travels in the dead of night, entirely stripped of the visual landmarks we rely on. It does not possess a map. It has no conceptual understanding of geography, and yet it crosses sprawling oceans and featureless landscapes, arriving at the exact same wintering grounds, down to the very same tree, year after year. For centuries, the absolute precision of this journey baffled the scientific world. How does a creature with a brain the size of a pea master the vast geometry of the Earth? Science eventually uncovered the overarching answer, but in doing so, it accidentally stumbled into a physical impossibility. We discovered that the European robin, along with sea turtles, migrating whales, and countless other species, navigates by sensing the Earth's magnetic field. They are intimately tuned to the invisible lines of magnetic force that wrap around our planet, generated by the churning ocean of molten iron thousands of miles beneath our feet. They possess an internal compass. But this discovery created a massive, glaring paradox in the rigid framework of classical biology. The Earth's magnetic field is incredibly, almost laughably weak. It is a ghost of a force. A cheap, plastic magnet clinging to the door of your refrigerator is hundreds of times stronger than the magnetic field of the entire planet. For a biological organism to detect a force this weak, it requires a sensor of unimaginable sensitivity. According to the strict rules of classical physics, this simply should not work. A living cell is a violent, chaotic environment. It is a boiling soup of molecules, proteins, and water, constantly vibrating with the frantic energy of thermal heat. The sheer, deafening noise of this microscopic chaos should completely drown out the whisper-thin influence of the Earth's magnetic field. The magnetic force is far too weak to physically push or pull on macroscopic biological cells. It lacks the mechanical authority to align a magnetic mineral inside a bird's brain or to force a heavy protein to shift its position. If you try to build a classical compass out of biological tissue, the relentless thermal vibration of the warm body will instantly shake it apart. Classical biology cannot explain the bird. The navigation of the European robin is a physical impossibility under the rules of the macroscopic world. To solve this paradox, we have to look past the flesh, past the cells, and past the heavy, predictable laws of chemistry. We must abandon the macroscopic world entirely and descend into the freezing, alien architecture of the quantum void. The secret to the bird's impossible journey does not lie in a physical compass. It lies in the absolute basement of reality, hidden in the delicate, highly specialized machinery of the bird's eye. The mechanism of this cosmic navigation begins with the arrival of a messenger from the stars. As the European robin flies through the pitch-black night, a single, solitary photon of ambient light, perhaps reflected from the cold surface of the moon or originating from a distant sun, enters the pupil of the bird's eye. It travels through the organic lens and strikes the retina, plunging into a specialized, microscopic protein known as cryptochrome. When this photon collides with the protein, its energy is violently absorbed. The impact shatters a delicate chemical bond, forcibly knocking a single electron out of its natural orbit and sending it flying across the microscopic structure of the protein. This singular, violent event creates what physicists call a radical pair. There are now two unpaired electrons sitting within the protein, separated by a vast expanse of molecular space. But because these two electrons were born from the exact same chemical bond, they are not truly separate. They share a deep, fundamental connection that defies all human logic and completely breaks the classical laws of the universe. These two electrons are quantum entangled. Entanglement is arguably the most unsettling, deeply terrifying phenomenon in all of modern physics. Albert Einstein famously loathed it, derisively calling it spooky action at a distance, because it implies that the universe is secretly connected in ways that violate the very concept of space and time. When two particles become entangled, they lose their individual identities. They no longer exist as two separate objects. They become a single, unified quantum state, regardless of the physical distance between them. If you alter the state of one electron, the other electron reacts instantaneously, perfectly mirroring its partner in a dance of absolute synchronization. Inside the retina of the flying bird, these two newly separated electrons exist in this ghostly, entangled state. They are suspended in a delicate superposition, their quantum spins rapidly flipping and fluctuating, intimately bound together in the dark. And it is right here, in this fragile, terrifying quantum dance, that the Earth's magnetic field finally finds its target. The magnetic field of the planet is far too weak to move a cell. It is too weak to push a protein. But it is just strong enough to interact with the ghostly, weightless spin of an electron. The entangled electrons in the cryptochrome protein are so perfectly isolated, so exquisitely balanced on the razor's edge of quantum probability that the whisper-thin magnetic lines of the Earth can subtly tip the scales. As the bird flies, altering its orientation relative to the planet's magnetic poles, the angle of the Earth's magnetic field washes over the entangled electrons. This invisible magnetic force subtly alters the rhythm of their quantum dance. It gently nudges their spins, changing the amount of time the electrons spend in one quantum state versus another. The planet is directly reaching into the eye of the bird and rewriting the quantum state of its fundamental particles. But a quantum state is invisible. How does the bird actually use this information to find its way across a continent? This is where the sheer, terrifying genius of evolutionary biology reveals itself. Biology acts as a translator, a machine designed to pull the ghosts of the quantum realm up into the macroscopic world. The specific quantum state of those entangled electrons dictates how the cryptochrome protein will ultimately react chemically. If the electrons are in one quantum state, the protein remains dormant. If the magnetic field alters their spin and forces them into a different state, the protein becomes chemically active. This chemical activation triggers a microscopic cascade, firing a signal down the bird's optic nerve and directly into its visual cortex. The European robin does not feel the magnetic field. It does not have an internal compass needle pointing north. It sees it. Through the lens of quantum entanglement, the invisible magnetic architecture of the Earth is translated into a visual overlay, superimposed directly onto the bird's perception of reality. As the bird turns its head in the dark, the chemical signals shift. It is highly likely that the robin perceives the magnetic field as a glowing, shifting pattern of light and shadow, a spectral compass painted across the night sky, guiding it flawlessly toward its destination. Let the existential weight of this mechanism truly settle into your mind. We have spent the last 100 years building massive, billion-dollar subterranean particle accelerators, constructing supercooled cryogenic chambers, and developing the most complex mathematics in human history just to catch a fleeting glimpse of quantum entanglement. We view it as a fragile, alien phenomenon, a bizarre glitch in the fabric of reality that belongs strictly to the sterile domain of theoretical physics. Yet, millions of years before humanity ever looked up at the stars, evolution had already mastered it. The biological world did not ignore the bizarre rules of the subatomic abyss. It weaponized them. A tiny, fragile bird, weighing less than a handful of leaves, is actively utilizing Einstein's worst nightmare to navigate across the freezing oceans of the Earth. It is capturing the spooky action at a distance, packaging it inside a highly specialized organic protein, and using it to read the invisible forces of a spinning planet. This revelation entirely destroys the comforting illusion that we live in a strictly classical world. We are forced to realize that the universe is deeply, profoundly interconnected across scales we previously thought were totally incompatible. The churning, molten iron core of the Earth, generating a magnetic field thousands of miles wide, is intimately and directly interacting with the weightless spin of a subatomic particle suspended inside the warm, wet tissue of a living eye. The macrocosm and the microcosm are not separate domains. They are locked together in a relentless, continuous exchange of information. When you look at the natural world, you are not just looking at chemistry and biology. You are witnessing a grand, highly organized containment field for the quantum void. The survival of an entire species relies on the universe allowing two particles to share a single fate. Life is not merely surviving on this planet. It is actively surfing the probabilities of the quantum realm. It is pulling the deepest, most incomprehensible mysteries of the cosmos out of the dark and using them to light the way home. We move through the world largely trusting our senses to provide a faithful, accurate representation of reality. We trust the light hitting our retinas. We trust the pressure waves vibrating against our eardrums, and we trust the tactile friction of the ground beneath our feet. These senses feel deeply intuitive. They feel grounded in the familiar, predictable, and mechanical laws of classical physics. When you touch a rough stone, you are feeling the literal, physical resistance of its atoms pushing back against the atoms in your hand. But there is one sense that operates on an entirely different level of intimacy. It is far more invasive and infinitely more mysterious than the rest. When you take a deep breath, you are not just passively observing your environment from a safe distance. You are physically pulling the outside world into your body. You are inhaling the invisible, microscopic debris of the universe. Every scent you have ever experienced. The sharp, metallic tang of rain on hot asphalt. The rich, dark aroma of crushed coffee beans. Or the heavy, ancient smell of a pine forest. Is the result of physical molecules drifting through the air and entering the dark, warm cavity of your nose. Once inside, these tiny fragments of the world travel up to the olfactory epithelium, a specialized patch of tissue packed with millions of highly sensitive nerve endings. It is here that the physical world is translated into the electrical language of the brain. But for over a century, the exact mechanism of this translation remained one of the most stubborn and baffling mysteries in human biology. How does a biological receptor actually know what a molecule is? For decades, science provided a very comforting, very mechanical answer. It was known as the classical lock and key model. According to this theory, the millions of receptors inside our noses are essentially biological locks, each possessing a highly specific, three-dimensional geometric shape. When you inhale a scent, the molecules act as keys. If a molecule shaped exactly like a triangle floats into the nasal cavity, it will only fit perfectly into a triangle-shaped receptor. When the physical geometry of the molecule perfectly matches the geometry of the receptor, the lock turns. The biological switch is thrown. An electrical signal fires down the olfactory nerve, and your brain instantly perceives a specific smell. It is a beautiful, elegant, and deeply Newtonian idea. It portrays the machinery of human biology as a microscopic factory floor, operating on the reliable laws of physical shape, mass, and mechanical friction. It is the exact kind of physics we can see and touch in our macroscopic lives, scaled down to the level of proteins and molecules. But biology, as we are slowly beginning to realize, is rarely that simple. As our understanding of organic chemistry deepened, a massive, glaring paradox began to emerge from the laboratory, threatening to tear the classical lock and key model entirely apart. Scientists began to discover molecules that completely defied the rules of geometric shape. They synthesized chemicals that had entirely different physical structures, molecules that looked nothing alike under a microscope, completely different keys with wildly different shapes. And yet, when inhaled by a human subject, they produced the exact same smell. How could two entirely different keys open the exact same biological lock? Even more terrifying to the classical mind was the inverse of this problem. Chemists took a specific molecule with a well-known scent, and they created an exact physical replica of it. They preserved the geometric shape of the molecule perfectly, leaving the physical structure completely unchanged. But they built it using slightly heavier building blocks. They replaced the standard hydrogen atoms in the molecule with deuterium, a heavier isotope of hydrogen. To the lock and key model, this change should be completely irrelevant. The physical shape of the molecule is absolutely identical. It is the exact same key, just forged from slightly heavier metal. It should fit perfectly into the exact same receptor and produce the exact same scent, but it does not. When human subjects inhaled these heavier molecules, the scent was entirely different. The lock and key model violently collapsed. The biological receptors in our noses were somehow able to tell the difference between two molecules with the exact same physical shape. The nose was not just feeling the geometry of the world, it was detecting something deeper, something hidden entirely from the classical laws of physics. If the receptors in our noses are not feeling the shape of a molecule, what exactly are they doing? To find the answer, we must abandon the rigid, solid world of classical mechanics and descend into the shivering, hyperactive reality of the quantum void. Down at the subatomic level, molecules are not solid, static objects. The chemical bonds that hold atoms together are not rigid steel bars. They are flexible, dynamic, and constantly in motion. They vibrate. Just like the strings of a guitar, every single chemical bond in the universe hums with a highly specific, inherent vibrational frequency. When you replace hydrogen with heavier deuterium, the shape of the molecule stays the same, but the added mass changes the tension of the bonds. The molecule vibrates at a different frequency. It plays a different microscopic chord. The terrifying realization is that the receptors in our noses are not mechanical locks. They are biological microphones. We do not just feel the shape of a molecule, we listen to its quantum vibration. But this realization immediately creates a new, seemingly insurmountable problem. How on earth does a wet, organic, biological protein actually listen to the microscopic vibration of a chemical bond? The frequency of a molecule is not a sound wave. It does not push air. It is a subtle, invisible oscillation of electromagnetic energy. To detect a vibration this delicate, the human body resorts to a mechanism so profoundly bizarre that it defies all common sense and violates the fundamental laws of classical reality. The human sense of smell relies on the physical impossibility of quantum tunneling. To understand this, we have to look closely at the internal architecture of the olfactory receptor. Deep inside the biological protein, there is an electron. This electron is waiting to be transferred across the receptor to trigger the electrical nerve signal that will eventually reach the brain. But there is a problem. The electron is separated from its destination by a physical gap, an energy barrier that it simply does not have the power to cross. In the classical world, if you do not have enough energy to climb over a wall, you are permanently trapped on the other side. You cannot pass. The electron, lacking the necessary energy, should remain stuck forever. The signal should never fire, and we should live in a world entirely devoid of scent. But down in the subatomic abyss, particles do not behave like solid objects. An electron is not a tiny, hard sphere. It is a smeared-out wave of probability. It does not have a single, defined location until it is forced to interact with something. And because it exists as a wave of mathematical potential, it has a tiny, almost imperceptible chance of existing on the other side of a barrier, even if it does not have the energy to climb over it. Under the right conditions, the electron can borrow energy from the chaotic void of the universe, fade completely out of existence on one side of the barrier, and instantly materialize on the other side. It does not travel through the space between. It simply ceases to be here and begins to be there. It passes through the solid wall like a phantom. This is quantum tunneling, a phenomenon so strange that it feels like a glitch in the programming of the cosmos. But there is a catch. The universe demands absolute, uncompromising balance. For this specific type of tunneling to occur in the receptor, the electron must lose a highly precise, exact amount of energy during its ghostly journey across the gap. If it cannot dump that exact amount of energy, the teleportation is mathematically forbidden. The electron remains trapped. This is where the scent molecule finally reveals its true purpose. When you inhale a molecule, it drifts into the receptor and sits right in the middle of this microscopic gap. As the electron attempts to tunnel across the barrier, it encounters the molecule. If the chemical bonds of that specific scent molecule are vibrating at the exact right frequency, they can absorb the exact amount of energy the electron needs to lose. The vibrating molecule acts as a quantum tuning fork. It provides the perfect, highly specific energetic bridge. The moment the frequency matches, the laws of quantum mechanics allow the transaction. The molecule absorbs the energy, the electron instantly teleports across the barrier, the biological switch is thrown, and the nerve fires. If the molecule is the wrong shape, it cannot reach the gap. If the molecule is the right shape but vibrates at the wrong frequency, like our heavier, deuterium-laced isotope, it cannot absorb the correct amount of energy. The electron is denied passage. The tunneling fails, and the brain registers an entirely different scent, or nothing at all. This mechanism is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. It means that the human body has constructed millions of highly calibrated, microscopic quantum traps. We are actively utilizing the ability of subatomic particles to walk through solid walls in order to perceive our environment. The implications of this phantom sense are staggering. It forces us to completely reevaluate our relationship with the physical world. We tend to view our senses as blunt, macroscopic instruments, interpreting a heavy, classical universe. We assume that the weirdness of quantum mechanics is locked away in subterranean particle accelerators, entirely divorced from our warm, biological reality. But the truth is that the boundary between the macroscopic world and the quantum abyss does not exist. The wall is a biological illusion. Think about what happens when you experience a sudden, powerful memory triggered by a scent. You catch the faint smell of wood smoke in the autumn air, or the specific perfume worn by someone you once loved, and you are instantly transported back in time. The emotional weight of that memory, the vivid, rushing reality of the human experience, is entirely dictated by a subatomic transaction. That profound emotional response only exists because an electron inside a protein in your nasal cavity faded out of existence and teleported across an invisible barrier. We are not separated from the bizarre, reality-breaking laws of the cosmos. We are deeply, intimately reliant upon them. We are tethered to the subatomic void. Every time you take a breath, your body is orchestrating a highly synchronized, localized quantum event. You are pulling the chemical structure of the world into your anatomy, and you are interrogating the fundamental vibration of its atomic bonds using the ghostly mechanics of probability. You are quite literally smelling the quantum vibrations of the universe. It is a deeply humbling realization. The architecture of human perception is not built on the solid, reliable ground of classical physics. It is suspended delicately over the chaotic, unpredictable ocean of quantum mechanics. Our reality, our ability to interpret the environment around us, is merely a macroscopic translation of events so small and so inherently strange that they defy all human logic. We are vast, walking organic machines, but the ultimate interface between our minds and the surrounding cosmos is governed by the phantoms of the quantum void. There is a deep, psychological comfort embedded within the human illusion of permanence. We look out at a towering mountain range or a monolithic slab of granite, and we see an unyielding, eternal stability. We desperately project this same desire for permanence onto ourselves. We navigate the chaos of our daily lives by holding on to the belief that underneath the fleeting moments, the aging of our skin, and the shifting of our memories, there remains a solid, unchanging core of who we are. We trust that our biology is built upon a reliable foundation, a master blueprint that dictates our form, our function, and our future with absolute mechanical precision. This blueprint is DNA. It is the sacred code of life, and we view it as the ultimate, impenetrable vault of our biological identity. To truly appreciate the majesty of this biological archive, you must understand its incomprehensible scale. Inside the dark, microscopic nucleus of almost every single cell in your body lies a twisted double helix of genetic information. If you were to extract the DNA from just one of your cells and stretch it out, it would measure roughly 2 meters in length. If you took all the DNA from every cell in your entire body and unspooled it end to end, that microscopic, invisible thread would stretch from the Earth to the Sun and back again more than 300 times. It is a cosmic-scale library written in a subatomic font. This sacred code has been passed down through an unbroken, brutal chain of survivors, stretching back billions of years into the deep, hostile oceans of the primordial Earth. It holds the successful memories of countless generations, dictating the exact pigment of your eyes, the architectural rhythm of your beating heart, and the sprawling, electrified network of your conscious brain. To preserve this sacred information against the relentless, degrading forces of entropy, the DNA molecule relies on a brilliantly simple structural mechanism. The 2 opposing strands of the double helix, the twisting backbones of the archive, are held together by millions of microscopic rungs, forming the shape of a spiral ladder. These rungs are forged by what chemists call hydrogen bonds. But in the physical reality of the cell, a hydrogen bond is essentially a shared proton. A single, positively charged subatomic particle sits exactly in the middle of a microscopic gap, acting as a structural pillar between the 2 halves of the genetic ladder. It is the physical glue that locks your identity together. According to the classical rules of biology, this proton is entirely reliable. It sits in a deep potential energy, trapped securely in its designated position by the absolute laws of electromagnetism. As long as that single proton stays exactly where it belongs, the rungs hold, the structure remains beautifully stable, and the sacred code is perfectly preserved. The massive, complex machinery of your cells can read the instructions, copy them, and build the architecture of your body without a single catastrophic error. We assume that this process is as reliable as a printing press stamping out identical copies of a masterpiece. But this beautiful, classical image of a flawless biological machine harbors a dark and terrifying secret. We have made a fundamental, macroscopic assumption that blinds us to the reality of the universe. We intuitively imagine the proton as a solid object. We picture it as a microscopic bead of matter, a tiny, hard sphere firmly anchored in place by the reliable laws of chemistry. But a proton is not a solid object. It is a quantum particle. And the quantum world does not care about the stability of your biology. When we plunge down into the microscopic abyss, at the absolute basement of physical reality, the comforting concept of a fixed, permanent location entirely disintegrates. A proton does not exist in a single, defined point in space. It is governed by the haunting mechanics of wave-particle duality and the strict boundaries of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. The proton exists as a smeared-out wave of mathematical probability. It is a shivering, uncertain ghost of matter. Most of the time, the highest peak of this probability wave is concentrated right in the center of the hydrogen bond, exactly where classical biology needs it to be. But the edges of that probability wave stretch out into the dark. They bleed across the microscopic gap between the 2 strands of DNA, extending into regions of the molecule where the proton has absolutely no physical right to exist. This wave-like nature means that the proton holding your genetic code together is subject to the terrifying, unpredictable laws of the quantum void. It is bounded by an energy barrier, an electromagnetic wall that it simply does not have the classical energy to cross. According to the macroscopic laws of physics, the proton is permanently trapped. It must stay on its designated side of the genetic rung. But because the proton is a wave of probability, there is a tiny, persistent, and haunting chance that it can borrow energy from the chaotic background of the universe and bypass the barrier entirely. In a fraction of a microsecond, the proton simply fades out of existence on one side of the DNA strand and instantly materializes on the wrong side. It does not travel through the space between. It does not push its way across the gap. It teleports. This is the phenomenon of quantum tunneling. It is the exact same ghostly mechanism that allows nuclear fusion to overcome the crushing repulsion of atoms, igniting the cores of stars across the cosmos. And it is occurring right in the absolute center of your genetic code. The structural pillar of your DNA has spontaneously moved. The proton has crossed the void. It has betrayed the blueprint. In the quiet, isolated dark of the cellular nucleus, this microscopic teleportation happens constantly. Protons are flickering back and forth across the genetic divide, driven by the relentless, boiling uncertainty of the quantum realm. Usually, the proton tunnels back. The ghost returns to its proper, classical location. The structural integrity of the rung is restored, and the code remains intact. The balance of reality is re-established before the biological machinery of the cell ever notices the glitch. But biology is not a static museum. It is a frantic, ceaseless, and violently active factory. Your cells are constantly dividing, constantly needing to reproduce, which requires them to continuously unzip the double helix in order to read and copy the sacred code. The terrifying threat of the quantum world is unlocked entirely by a collision of timing. Imagine the colossal, molecular machinery of the cell, vast complexes of enzymes moving at blinding speeds, arriving to read a specific section of your DNA. These enzymes act like a massive, unstoppable zipper, tearing the two strands of the double helix apart to expose the chemical letters so they can be perfectly replicated. Now, imagine that at the exact, imperceptible microsecond, the zipper reaches a specific rung on the ladder. The proton holding that rung together spontaneously quantum tunnels to the wrong side. The strands are violently ripped apart before the proton has the chance to tunnel back. The wave function collapses. The ghost is permanently trapped on the wrong side of the genetic divide. When the biological machinery attempts to read the newly exposed genetic letter, it finds a completely unexpected chemical signature. Because the proton moved, the molecular geometry of the letter has fundamentally changed. The code is physically disguised. The reading machinery expects to find one set of instructions, but it reads an entirely different one. It misreads the chemical alphabet, mistaking a C for a T or a G for an A. The cell, operating as a blind, dutiful machine, copies this new, altered sequence into the fresh strand of DNA, completely oblivious to the fact that it is writing a catastrophic error into the sacred archive. A brand new letter has been permanently burned into the blueprint of your body. This is not a gradual, chemical decay. This is not cellular damage caused by exposure to ultraviolet radiation from the sun, or the ingestion of toxic, carcinogenic chemicals from the environment. This is a spontaneous mutation caused by the fundamental, unavoidable mathematical uncertainty of the universe itself. It is a glitch in the absolute fabric of reality, manifesting as a permanent change in your biological identity. The implications of this invisible quantum glitch are staggering. They present a profound, terrifying duality that defines the entire history and future of life on Earth. On one hand, this random, uncontrollable teleportation of subatomic particles is the hidden, driving engine of all biological evolution. Without the spontaneous mutation introduced by the quantum void, the sacred code of DNA would remain perfectly, statically identical forever. Biology would be a broken record, repeating the exact same microscopic, single-celled organism for billions of years, trapped in an endless loop of flawless, boring replication. The quantum glitch is the essential mechanism that injects chaos, variation, and novelty into the biological world. It is the blind architect of diversity. Every beautiful, complex biological structure you have ever seen, the sweeping, aerodynamic wings of a falcon, the crushing, bioluminescent adaptations of creatures in the deep ocean, and the staggering, interconnected neural network of the human brain, owes its existence to the random, teleporting errors of a quantum particle. We are the macroscopic descendants of billions of years of quantum mistakes. We owe our consciousness, our intelligence, and our very ability to contemplate the universe to the fact that the genetic code is slightly, inherently broken by the laws of physics. But the universe does not grant favors without exacting a terrible, indiscriminate toll. The quantum void is blind, and it is entirely, ruthlessly indifferent to our survival. The exact same ghostly teleportation that drives the majestic engine of evolution is also the architect of our greatest destruction. When a proton tunnels to the wrong side of a critical, highly sensitive gene, a gene specifically responsible for regulating the division, growth, and death of a cell, the resulting mutation is not a miraculous gift of evolution. It is a death sentence. The code is misread. The fundamental instructions that tell the cell how to behave are scrambled. The cell ignores the biological commands to stop dividing, and it begins to relentlessly, violently multiply, consuming the resources of the body in a chaotic rebellion of flesh. This is the absolute origin of cancer. The disease that haunts our species, the chaotic, terrifying breakdown of our own biology, can be traced directly back to the spontaneous, unpredictable teleportation of a subatomic particle deep within the dark of the nucleus. It is a haunting realization that the exact same quantum mechanism that gave us the capacity for life, thought, and beauty is also the mechanism that guarantees our physical fragility. We build monumental philosophies and complex societies to cope with our existence. We seek meaning, purpose, and control in a universe that often feels overwhelmingly vast and apathetic. We wrap ourselves in the comforting illusion that we are the absolute masters of our own biological destiny. We believe that if we live carefully, if we avoid danger and protect our bodies, we can maintain the flawless integrity of our physical form. But the terrifying reality of quantum biology strips that illusion completely away. We are forced to confront a deeply unsettling truth about the nature of our own autonomy. The absolute core of who we are, the sacred blueprint that dictates the shape of our lives, the health of our bodies, and the inevitability of our death, is not a secure vault. It is a fragile, shivering architecture suspended delicately over a roaring sea of quantum noise. We are at the constant, unrelenting mercy of mathematical probability. Our biological identity is not a static, finished product, locked away safely from the chaotic forces of the cosmos. It is an ongoing, chaotic negotiation with the abyss. Every single time a cell in your body divides, you are unknowingly playing a game of cosmic roulette with the laws of quantum mechanics. We are walking, breathing paradoxes. We are macroscopic creatures built entirely out of the mathematical uncertainty of the microscopic world. The ghost is not just haunting the machine, The ghost is actively writing the code, and we are left to navigate the profound consequences, trapped in a beautiful, terrifying reality where the difference between the evolution of a species and the obliteration of an individual is decided entirely by the random teleportation of a single, invisible spark in the dark. There is an architecture to human thought that relies entirely on the concept of boundaries. From the moment we first open our eyes, our brains are aggressively trained to recognize where one thing ends and another begins. We draw strict lines between the sky and the sea, between the solid earth and the atmosphere, and, most importantly, between ourselves and the rest of the universe. Our skin feels like an absolute perimeter. It gives us the profound, comforting illusion that we are entirely self-contained biological entities, walking independently through a world that remains strictly outside of us. We navigate reality with the inherent belief that to be alive is to possess a sanctuary of flesh and blood, a private, isolated domain governed solely by the warm, predictable rules of macroscopic chemistry. For centuries, our philosophy and our science mirrored this biological intuition. We constructed a massive intellectual fortress around the concept of life. We believed that organic matter was somehow fundamentally different from the dead, sterile dust of the cosmos. Even as we abandoned ancient myths and embraced the mechanical, clockwork universe of classical physics, we still treated biology as a special, isolated system. The microscopic world was viewed as a collection of tiny, solid gears, enzymes and proteins locking together like the heavy components of an intricate clock. Because of this, we assumed that the bizarre, chaotic, and terrifying laws of the deep subatomic world were permanently locked away from us. The quantum realm, with its teleporting particles, its shimmering waves of probability, and its spooky, instantaneous connections across space, was viewed as a fragile, alien landscape. It was a reality that only existed in the freezing vacuum of deep space, or within the crushing, high-energy hearts of stars. It certainly had no place in the warm, wet, and messy environment of a living, breathing body. The uncertainty of the quantum void was considered the ultimate enemy of biological order. But as we have peered deeper into the molecular machinery of survival, this comforting fortress has completely collapsed. We are now standing at the edge of a profound philosophical crisis, forced to confront a reality that radically destabilizes our understanding of who and what we are. The boundary between the living and the non-living is a macroscopic illusion. The wall between the biological sanctuary and the cold, mechanical weirdness of quantum physics does not actually exist. We are forced to abandon the comforting idea that we are distinct, insulated creatures operating on the reliable laws of cause and effect. Instead, we must face the terrifying truth that our biology is entirely porous to the absolute basement of reality. The deep, fundamental strangeness of the universe is not just happening around us in the cold dark of space. It is happening inside of us. It is the very engine of our survival. The quantum void is not a distant, abstract concept studied by physicists in underground laboratories. It is the invisible scaffolding of your own heartbeat, the silent architect of your DNA, and the hidden compass guiding the migration of the natural world. To truly grasp the magnitude of this revelation, we must look at how humanity currently attempts to interact with the quantum world when modern physicists want to build a quantum computer. To harness the staggering computational power of superposition and entanglement, they must engage in an act of extreme, almost impossible engineering. A human-built quantum machine is arguably the most fragile object ever constructed by our species. To protect the delicate quantum states from collapsing under the chaotic noise of the environment, these synthetic computers must be placed inside massive, gold-plated dilution refrigerators. They are plunged into a state of artificial, freezing death, cooled with liquid helium to a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. They are shielded by thick layers of lead and copper to block out the faintest whisper of electromagnetic radiation, and isolated from the slightest seismic tremor of the Earth. Humanity must build a silent, freezing fortress just to coax the quantum world into the macroscopic realm for a few fleeting microseconds. If a single stray photon of ambient light enters the chamber, or if a single molecule of air vibrates too violently, the delicate quantum coherence instantly shatters. The magic vanishes, and the system collapses back into the mundane, classical world. Now, compare that sterile, freezing, multi-million-dollar cryogenic sanctuary to the interior of a living cell. A biological cell is the exact opposite of a quiet vacuum. It is a microscopic hurricane. It is a wet, suffocating, fiercely agitated environment packed with billions of water molecules, proteins, and enzymes, all slamming into one another at blinding speeds. It is driven by the relentless, boiling chaos of thermal energy. According to every established rule of classical physics and human engineering, this warm, messy, violent biological storm should act as an absolute executioner for anything resembling quantum behavior. The sheer thermal noise of a living organism should instantly crush any fragile quantum state before it even has the chance to form. The environment is simply too hot, too wet, and too loud. And yet, life is not a refuge from the bizarre rules of physics. It is the ultimate expression of them. Against all odds, and against all of our classical intuition, the warm, wet, chaotic environment of the biological world has somehow learned to perfectly insulate and harness the fragile phenomena of the quantum vacuum. Over billions of years of blind, relentless evolution, nature achieved what human engineers can barely manage in a freezing vacuum. It took the boiling noise of the cell and turned it into a profound advantage. Evolution did not try to silence the chaos. Instead, it engineered complex, vibrating protein scaffolds that use the thermal noise of the environment to actually sustain and protect quantum coherence. The biological structures within a leaf, or the retina of a bird, or the olfactory receptors in your own nose, are tuned with such absolute, incomprehensible precision that they can hold a subatomic particle in a state of superposition right in the middle of a molecular storm. The water molecules inside a cell, which we usually view as a chaotic fluid, actually form highly structured, dynamic cages around these proteins, acting as a flexible shield. The living cell acts as a wet quantum machine, a highly organized containment field that filters out the destructive noise and amplifies the quantum signal. This means that life did not retreat from the uncertainty of the subatomic world. It leaned directly into it. It dug its biological roots deep into the probabilistic foam of the universe and pulled the ghosts of the quantum realm up into the macroscopic daylight. This realization fundamentally forces a terrifying and beautiful redefinition of life itself. For a long time, we have looked at the natural world, the sprawling forests, the deep oceans, the migrating flocks of birds in the autumn sky, and viewed it as a grand tapestry of organic chemistry. We saw life as a collection of carbon-based fluids and tissues, a fundamentally different category of existence compared to the rigid, metallic technology we build with our hands. We drew a strict, unyielding line between the machine and the organism. We believed that biology was soft and natural, while quantum mechanics was hard and artificial. But quantum biology completely dissolves that line. When a plant uses quantum superposition to calculate the most efficient path for a photon of sunlight, it is not merely acting like a computer. It is a computer. It is a biological quantum processor running impossibly complex algorithms at room temperature. When a bird uses entangled electrons to see the magnetic field of the Earth, it is utilizing a quantum sensor far more advanced than anything housed in a military satellite. When your DNA is spontaneously rewritten by the teleportation of a proton across a hydrogen bond, your genetic code is being actively edited by the probabilistic mechanics of the void. The boundary between a sterile, metallic quantum computer sitting in a cryogenic physics lab and a living, breathing organism has completely collapsed. We are machines. We are just built out of a different, infinitely more complex kind of hardware. We are wet quantum machines, forged in the ancient oceans of the Earth, constructed from water, carbon, and the chaotic vibrations of thermal energy. We are biological automatons built out of quantum noise. Our flesh and blood are not a sanctuary from the harsh realities of physics. They are an interface. They are a highly evolved, organic technology designed to navigate the macroscopic world by actively exploiting the paradoxical rules of the microscopic one. This redefinition strips away a deep layer of human arrogance. We tend to view artificial intelligence and synthetic quantum computing as the ultimate pinnacle of physical complexity, a frontier that we are pushing into the future. But the reality is that advanced quantum computing has been walking the surface of the Earth for billions of years. It is swimming in the deep, crushing trenches of the ocean. It is blooming in the dark canopy of the rainforest. It is breathing in the room you are sitting in right now. We are forced to look at ourselves in the mirror and confront a deeply unsettling reflection. Beneath the familiar warmth of our skin, beneath the steady, rhythmic beating of our hearts, and beneath the conscious, narrative flow of our own minds, there is a hidden, alien architecture at work. The solid, predictable reality we think we inhabit is a macroscopic illusion. It is a highly rendered simulation generated by a biological machine that operates entirely on the logic of phantoms and probabilities. The profound philosophical crisis is not just that we are intimately connected to the quantum world, but that we are the inevitable, staggering consequence of it. We are not separate, macroscopic observers looking down at the strange behavior of atoms through a microscope. We are the atoms, arranged in such a beautifully complex configuration that the quantum void has somehow gained the ability to look back at itself. Every thought you possess, every breath you take, and every single movement of your body is a testament to the staggering, terrifying engineering of the natural world. You are a localized region of the universe that has learned to borrow the uncertainty of the abyss and weave it into a living, breathing structure. You are suspended over the fundamental chaos of reality, held together by the invisible, ghostly mechanics of a universe that is far stranger, far darker, and infinitely more beautiful than our macroscopic brains were ever designed to comprehend. The comforting walls have fallen. The illusion of the self-contained biological entity is gone forever. We are left standing in the vast, open expanse of the cosmos, intimately connected to the cold, mechanical rules of physics that govern the dying stars and the freezing space between them. We are tethered to the void, sustained by the impossible, and entirely at the mercy of the wet quantum machine. We spend our lives looking outward, desperately trying to map the sprawling architecture of the cosmos. We build monumental telescopes to peer into the freezing dark of the early universe, capturing the fading light of ancient galaxies. We construct massive, subterranean particle colliders to smash the fundamental building blocks of matter into fleeting phantoms, trying to decipher the rules of the subatomic abyss. We have mapped the invisible filaments of dark matter, charted the chaotic orbits of distant worlds, and mathematically modeled the crushing singularity at the heart of a black hole. Yet, The most profound, terrifying, and impenetrable mystery in all of theoretical physics is not hiding out there in the cosmic void. It is sitting in the absolute dark, locked securely inside the vault of your own skull. The human brain is the most complex, densely organized, and computationally terrifying structure in the known universe. It is roughly 3 pounds of soft, grey tissue containing nearly 100 billion neurons, connected by hundreds of trillions of microscopic synapses, firing in a relentless, synchronized symphony of electrical and chemical energy. It is an architecture of such staggering complexity that it dwarfs the neural network of the most advanced artificial intelligence humanity has ever conceived. But complexity alone does not explain the true, haunting anomaly of our existence. We have seen how the natural world operates. We know that the fragile, warm environment of biology is not a barrier to the quantum realm, but a masterfully engineered containment field for it. We have watched the simple green leaf perfectly exploit the ghostly mechanics of quantum superposition to capture the radiation of the sun. We have seen a tiny, fragile bird weaponize the spooky action of quantum entanglement to navigate the invisible magnetic geometry of the Earth. And we have realized that the very foundation of our DNA is constantly being rewritten by teleporting subatomic particles. If the blind, unyielding engine of evolution has actively utilized the deepest, most powerful secrets of the quantum void to sustain a plant and guide a bird, it forces a profound, unavoidable, and deeply unsettling question. Would the universe build the most complex, highly evolved biological structure in existence and leave the ultimate power of quantum mechanics behind? If the lower rungs of the biological ladder are soaked in the paradoxes of the subatomic world, then the final frontier, the human mind, must be built upon them. For decades, classical neuroscience has treated the brain as a magnificent, but ultimately mechanical, meat computer. The prevailing scientific model suggests that consciousness, memory, perception, and emotion are nothing more than the emergent properties of classical physics. In this strict, biological view, a thought is just a sequential cascade of chemical gates opening and closing. A memory is just a hardened pathway of electrical resistance across a wet network of cells. Love, fear, existential dread, and the profound realization of our own mortality are simply the deterministic, inevitable outcomes of sodium and potassium ions rushing across a cellular membrane. It is a strictly Newtonian machine, governed by the cold, predictable, and inescapable laws of macroscopic cause and effect. But this classical, mechanical view fails spectacularly, and almost embarrassingly, when confronted with the deepest mystery of all, the subjective experience of reality. Mechanical gears, no matter how intricate, do not possess a subjective point of view. A highly complex network of electrical switches can process sensory data, but it does not experience the deep, melancholic sorrow of a fading memory. Nor does it perceive the vivid, startling brilliance of the color red. It just moves data from one node to another. This glaring failure of classical physics is known as the hard problem of consciousness. The classical firing of neurons is simply too clumsy, too rigid, and too mechanical to ever account for the profound, seamless, and deeply emotional experience of being alive. You cannot build a rich, continuous, subjective, and internally silent reality out of microscopic on and off switches. To bridge the terrifying gap between the mechanical brain and the conscious mind, science was forced to look past the neuron, descending into the absolute basement of biological architecture. This radical descent was spearheaded by a deeply controversial, yet brilliantly elegant collaboration between theoretical physicist Sir Roger Penrose, a mathematical titan who mapped the geometry of black holes alongside Stephen Hawking, and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. Together, they formulated a theory that completely shattered the classical dogma of neuroscience, an idea known as orchestrated objective reduction, or ORCH-OR. Their hypothesis boldly rejected the idea that the brain generates consciousness merely through the macroscopic firing of its cells. Instead, they proposed that the neuron itself is just a protective, biological shell. It is a macroscopic housing for a vastly more powerful, subatomic machine. They looked inside the cellular structure of the neuron and identified the true, hidden engine of the mind, the microtubules. Microtubules are the microscopic protein skeletons of the cell. They are incredibly tiny, hollow, cylindrical tubes that crisscross the interior of every neuron, forming a dense, perfectly geometric lattice. In classical biology, these tubes were viewed entirely as structural scaffolding, the rigid molecular beams that gave the cell its physical shape and transported chemical materials from one end of the neuron to the other, acting like microscopic conveyor belts. But Penrose and Hameroff saw something entirely different. They recognized that the physical geometry of a microtubule is a masterpiece of subatomic isolation. The inside of this microscopic tube is narrow enough and insulated enough to potentially shield its contents from the chaotic, boiling thermal noise of the surrounding biological cell. It is a quiet, highly structured corridor hiding right in the middle of a molecular hurricane. And inside that perfectly structured corridor, suspended in the dark, the delicate laws of quantum mechanics could theoretically take hold and survive. According to the ORCH, or theory, the fundamental building blocks of human consciousness are not chemical impulses, but pure quantum events. The microtubules are built from individual protein units called tubulin. Deep within the geometric lattice of the brain, the electrons inside these tubulin proteins enter a state of quantum superposition. They stop behaving as solid particles and become ghostly waves of probability, existing in multiple states and exploring multiple configurations simultaneously. Because the microtubules are so flawlessly structured, these delicate quantum states do not instantly collapse into the classical world. They are protected from decoherence. The biological machinery of the brain orchestrates a sustained state of quantum coherence, allowing the quantum waves to spread out, interacting and entangling with other quantum states across the vast, sprawling network of the brain. Millions of neurons, containing billions of microtubules, synchronize their quantum vibrations. The human mind is not a collection of isolated chemical reactions firing in the dark. It is a single, unified, coherent quantum state beating in a delicate, rhythmic harmony beneath the skull. But in the unforgiving realm of physics, a quantum superposition cannot last forever. Eventually, the wave of probability must break. The universe cannot sustain the tension of infinite possibilities indefinitely. It must force a decision. The quantum state must collapse down into a single, definitive physical reality. Penrose hypothesized that this collapse is not just a random subatomic event, and it is not triggered by a human observer looking at a measurement device. The collapse is driven by the fundamental geometry of space-time itself. The collapse of the quantum wave function inside the microtubules is the exact, fundamental moment of conscious awareness. Every single time the entangled, coherent quantum state in your brain reaches a critical threshold of mass and energy, the gravity of the universe forces it to collapse. That instantaneous collapse creates a discrete, microscopic moment of subjective experience. It is a single, frozen frame of reality. When billions of these quantum collapses occur in highly orchestrated, rapid succession, ticking away millions of times a second, They blur together like the frames of a film projector, creating the seamless, continuous, and profound illusion of the stream of consciousness. Our thoughts, our awareness, and our very perception of reality are not the slow, clumsy product of classical chemistry. They are a sustained quantum state, flickering in and out of existence, drawing reality directly out of the subatomic void. Imagine what this actually implies about the intimate act of human thought. When you close your eyes and remember a specific moment from your childhood, you are not simply accessing a hard drive of chemical data encoded in organic matter. You are initiating a cascade of quantum entanglement. You are forcing the subatomic particles within your brain to enter a state of undefined potential, exploring the vast, probabilistic architecture of your memory in superposition before collapsing down into the specific, vivid, and emotional feeling of the past. Your free will, your ability to choose one path over another in a complex, unpredictable world, may not be an illusion generated by deterministic, unstoppable chemistry. It may be the literal consequence of quantum uncertainty. The brain uses the unresolved probability of the subatomic abyss to generate genuine novelty, allowing us to break free from the rigid, mechanical clockwork of the classical universe. We are not passengers in a deterministic machine, riding a predetermined rail from birth to death. We are active, fundamental participants in the quantum collapse, constantly shaping and deciding the geometry of our own reality with every conscious breath. If the ouch or theory, or any similar model of a quantum mind, proves to be true, it triggers a philosophical earthquake that shatters our understanding of our place in the cosmos. It forces us to permanently abandon the deeply ingrained idea that consciousness is just a strange, accidental byproduct of wet biological evolution, a local, irrelevant phenomenon isolated to a damp rock orbiting a standard star in the quiet suburbs of a galaxy. In the classical view, the universe is a massive, dead, and apathetic arena, and we are just fleeting, insignificant sparks of awareness trapped inside it, looking out into the cold dark through biological windows. We are entirely separate from the stage upon which we stand. But if consciousness is a fundamental property of quantum state reduction, if the very act of awareness is intimately, inextricably tied to the collapse of the wave function, then the human mind is not separate from the fabric of the universe. It is woven directly into it. The quantum void is not just a landscape of empty physics and dead mathematical equations. It is an ocean of raw, unformatted information. The exact same bizarre, paradoxical rules that govern the entangled electrons in the eye of a migrating bird, or the superposition of an exciton harvesting sunlight in a green leaf, are the exact same rules that generate the vivid, internal theater of your own mind. We are made of the exact same probabilistic foam that exists at the absolute boundary of a black hole, and we are built from the exact same quantum static that fills the freezing voids between the galaxies. To possess a conscious mind is to possess a highly organized, biological machine designed specifically to interface with the fundamental geometry of space-time. We are not isolated, macroscopic observers staring at a dead, mechanical universe through a pane of glass. We are the universe. We are a localized, highly complex region of space-time that has evolved the physical and biological ability to enter a state of sustained quantum coherence, allowing the cosmos to finally look back at itself. When you stand in the quiet of the night and gaze up at the sprawling, chaotic light of the Milky Way, you are not just a collection of dead carbon atoms passively perceiving other dead atoms burning in the dark. You are the universe, experiencing its own terrifying immensity. You are the cosmos, translating the cold, silent, and unforgiving mathematics of the void into the profound, emotional, and deeply beautiful experience of awe. The human mind is the ultimate quantum paradox. It is a fragile, wet, biological structure that somehow manages to hold the infinite uncertainty of the abyss within its microscopic scaffolding. Our perception of time, our capacity for intense love, our desperate search for cosmic meaning, and our creeping, silent existential dread are all macroscopic translations of a subatomic dance. We are the biological architects of our own reality, collapsing the probability waves of the cosmos with every thought, every decision, and every conscious observation we make. We navigate the heavy, solid, and unforgiving world of classical physics, but the pilot controlling the vessel is a phantom, a flickering, entangled spark of quantum coherence suspended delicately in the dark. This is the absolute edge of human understanding, a place where biology, physics, and philosophy violently collide and merge into a single, breathtaking truth. We build our identity on the illusion of macroscopic solidity. From the very first moment we open our eyes and reach out into the world, our developing brains construct an absolute, unyielding philosophy of mass and consequence. We build our fundamental sense of self and our entire understanding of reality on the comforting friction of the physical world. We feel the heavy, relentless pull of gravity anchoring us to the earth. We feel the sharp, undeniable resistance of a wooden door, the cold, smooth surface of a pane of glass, and the warm, rhythmic pulse of our own blood rushing forcefully through our veins. We are taught by every sensory input we possess that we are formidable, self-contained biological entities. We believe, with every fiber of our being, that we are solid architectures of flesh and blood, ruled entirely by the predictable, mechanical laws of classical chemistry and Newtonian physics. This intuitive, heavy worldview has served our species incredibly well. It is the invisible evolutionary armor that allowed our ancient ancestors to navigate the brutal, unforgiving landscape of the macroscopic Earth. It allowed us to calculate the parabolic trajectory of a thrown spear, to build towering structures of stone and steel that can withstand the violent shear of a hurricane, and to chart the predictable, clockwork orbits of the planets sweeping across the night sky. We constructed our vast civilizations, our philosophies, and our most foundational sciences upon this solid, deterministic bedrock. We convinced ourselves that biology was merely a complex, highly organized extension of a machine. We viewed the human body as a magnificent, wet engine composed of billions of tiny, interlocking gears, ticking away with mathematical certainty in the dark. In this classical framework, every effect has a clearly defined cause. Objects exist in absolute, measurable locations, and the bizarre, chaotic paradoxes of the quantum void are safely locked away in the freezing vacuum of space, forever divorced from the warm, breathing reality of life. We built a massive, conceptual wall between the living and the dead. Physics was the language of stars and atoms. Biology was the language of blood and sap. It was a comforting lie, a necessary fiction that kept us safe from the mind-bending reality of the universe. But as our instruments grew sharper, as our lasers pierced deeper into the fundamental architecture of living tissues, we began to see the cracks in the wall. As we stripped away the macroscopic layers of tissue, cell, and protein, descending into the absolute basement of organic matter, we uncovered a reality that fundamentally shatters our comforting illusion. The solid ground beneath our feet has given way to a bottomless, shifting ocean of probability. The terrifying, undeniable truth is that beneath the surface of flesh and bone, biology is not a mechanical clockwork. It is a haunting, delicate manifestation of the void. We are not insulated from the strange, reality-breaking laws of the cosmos. We are entirely, helplessly, and beautifully dependent on them. The lush, green canopy of the natural world, the sprawling, photosynthetic lungs of our planet, only survives because it can force energy to exist in multiple places at the exact same time. The plants are harvesting the radiation of a distant, thermonuclear star through the ghostly mechanics of quantum superposition. They are splitting packets of pure energy into phantom waves, running simultaneous calculations through the dark molecular forests of their cells to catch the light before it dies. The vast, global migrations of the animal kingdom, the millions of creatures moving seamlessly across the freezing face of the earth, are not guided by classical maps. They are steered by the spooky, instantaneous connection of quantum entanglement. Life is actively utilizing subatomic particles that share a single, unified fate across space, turning the invisible magnetic geometry of our spinning planet into a visual, guiding beacon in the dark. Even our own human senses, the very tools we use to perceive the reality around us, are compromised by the abyss. When we inhale the scent of the world, we are not just feeling the physical geometry of molecules like a key slipping into a lock. We are listening to the subatomic vibration of chemical bonds. We are relying on electrons fading completely out of existence and instantly teleporting across biological barriers through quantum tunneling. The act of smelling the rain or recognizing the scent of smoke is a macroscopic translation of an impossible subatomic transaction. And the infiltration of the quantum realm does not stop at our senses. It reaches down into the deepest, most sacred biological architecture we possess. The twisting, molecular blueprint of DNA, the vast genetic archive that holds the instructions for the color of our eyes, the rhythm of our hearts, and the intricate wiring of our minds, is not a permanent, unyielding vault. It is a fragile ladder held together by shivering, uncertain particles. Our very genetic code is constantly being rewritten by the teleporting ghosts of quantum tunneling. The spontaneous mutations that drive the majestic, sprawling engine of evolution across millions of years, as well as the catastrophic cellular errors that lead to the chaotic rebellion of cancer and our inevitable physical decay, are both authored by protons fading out of one physical reality and instantly materializing on the wrong side of an electromagnetic barrier. The absolute core of our biological identity is constantly, relentlessly, at the mercy of random, uncontrollable quantum teleportation. We are forced to confront the staggering fact that the machinery of life is not a sanctuary from the quantum world. It is a biological containment field designed specifically to capture, insulate, and exploit it. The wet, boiling, noisy environment of the living cell, which classical physics insisted would instantly crush any delicate quantum state under a tidal wave of thermal noise, is actually a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. Life is a macroscopic vessel built to surf the probabilistic waves of the subatomic ocean. The proteins and enzymes within us are tuned like microscopic instruments, vibrating at the exact frequencies necessary to protect the quantum ghosts from collapsing. This realization triggers a profound, existential unmooring. It rips away the heavy anchor of classical physics and leaves us adrift in a universe that is far stranger and far more deeply interconnected than we ever dared to imagine. It forces us to entirely redefine what it means to be alive. We can no longer view ourselves as isolated, classical objects moving through a dead, mechanical universe. The boundary between the living organism and the sterile cosmos is a biological fiction. We are intimately, violently, and beautifully tethered to the fundamental fabric of reality. The exact same paradoxes that dictate the behavior of singularity cores, the birth of nebulas, and the expanding edge of the universe are dictating the firing of your neurons and the cellular division in your blood. We are machines built entirely out of quantum noise. We are highly organized, temporary patterns of matter and energy that have somehow learned to borrow the uncertainty of the abyss and weave it into survival, thought, and consciousness. To fully internalize this truth is to experience a terrifying, sweeping kind of awe. It requires us to abandon the safety of the macroscopic world and step out into the vast, open expanse of theoretical reality. Think about the profound implications for human consciousness itself. If our senses, our biology, and our genetic legacy are all governed by the ghosts of quantum phenomena, then the very thoughts we use to comprehend the universe might be woven from the exact same fabric. The silent, internal theater of your mind, the rich, deeply emotional tapestry of your memories, and the vivid, unmistakable experience of simply being awake might not be the mechanical output of a chemical computer. They might be a sustained state of quantum coherence. Consciousness could be a delicate, orchestrated collapse of probability waves occurring millions of times a second within the dark, geometric lattice of your brain. We are not just observing the universe, we are the universe, suspended in a state of localized superposition, collapsing into self-awareness. For centuries, we have looked up at the night sky, feeling infinitely small and insignificant against the crushing, unimaginable scale of the cosmos. We have viewed the universe as a cold, apathetic theater, and ourselves as accidental, fleeting sparks of life struggling desperately against the overwhelming dark. But quantum biology flips this existential dread entirely on its head. You are not just a passive, fragile observer standing on a rock. You are an active, fundamental participant in the deepest mechanics of reality. The subatomic particles that make up your body are engaged in a relentless, continuous negotiation with the void. The electrons in your cells are tunneling through impenetrable barriers. The photons entering your retinas are collapsing from waves of infinite potential into concrete reality. And the protons in your DNA are shivering with the mathematical uncertainty of the cosmos. You are a localized concentration of the universe's most profound mysteries, wrapped securely in a fragile, temporary shell of organic matter. The terror of this realization does not come from a place of malice or danger. It is terrifying because it requires us to let go of the absolute control we thought we possessed. It requires us to accept that the solid, predictable world we love and rely upon is just a thin, macroscopic layer of ice formed over an infinitely deep, dark, and shifting ocean of probability. We are completely surrendered to the laws of a reality that our biological brains were never designed to intuitively understand. We are forced to navigate a universe where cause and effect are not absolute, where the very concept of distance is an illusion, and where solid matter is just a temporary, frozen expression of energy. Yet, within this overwhelming terror, there is an unimaginable, sweeping beauty. The fact that the blind, chaotic forces of evolution managed to harness the paradoxes of quantum mechanics to create life is a testament to the staggering, unbreakable resilience of existence. The universe is not dead. It is wildly, vibrantly, and incomprehensibly active at every conceivable scale. From the sprawling, spiraling arms of distant galaxies down to the invisible, vibrating bonds of a single DNA molecule, the cosmos is engaged in a relentless drive toward complexity. And you, in this brief, glowing moment of cosmic time, are the highest known expression of that complexity. We are the universe, exploring its own boundaries. We are the void given a voice, a mind, and a fleeting moment of time to look back at itself and wonder. The next time you stand before a mirror, I want you to look past the familiar reflection. Look past the geometry of your face, the texture of your skin, and the biological color of your eyes. Look deeper into the dark, silent pupil, and realize that you are not looking at a simple, macroscopic machine. You are not just a biological organism bound by the mundane, predictable laws of classical chemistry. You are looking at a sprawling, walking quantum paradox. You are an impossibly complex orchestration of billions of tiny, uncertain ghosts, all working in perfect, fragile harmony to sustain the illusion of solidity. You are suspended delicately over the absolute abyss of the subatomic world, holding the infinite uncertainty of the universe within your own beating heart. Embrace the terrifying, beautiful mystery of your own existence. You are a masterpiece of probability, a fleeting spark of coherence in the dark, and a living testament to the strangest, most profound forces in the cosmos. Good night, and see you in the next video.